When you walk into most classrooms today, what do you see? Rows of students, a single voice at the front, a race to cover content. In many schools, education still means one thing: lecture. This model leaves little room for discovery, dialogue, or personal connection to the material. Students are taught to remember answers, not ask questions. They listen, memorize, repeat, but barely reflect. It's efficient, it looks productive, but as John Dewey warned over a century ago, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. Dewey believed learning wasn't about depositing knowledge, but reconstructing experience. That real education happens when students interact with ideas, when they experiment, question, and engage the world around them. But pragmatic discourse, the kind that values thinking through problems, is hard to find in a system built for efficiency over meaning. And in an age of digital distractions and standardized testing, slowing down to critically think feels like a luxury few classrooms can afford.
We will challenge the pitfalls in the current education system and call for a reform that emphasizes the importance of critical thinking. In doing this, we will utilize John Dewey and bell hooks to highlight the importance of critical thinking, as well as the power of education for a democratic society. We will use a P4C essay, as well as dopamine democracy, to express some more modern issues evolving, as well as possible ideas for classroom improvements. Additionally, we will utilize Reimagining to address the challenges and benefits of integrating AI into the education system.
I'm Alexandria Ali Fergano. I'm a senior at St. Joseph's University, graduating with a secondary ed and history major with 2 minors in English and American Studies. I've just completed my student teaching experience at Franklintown Charter High School in the Bridesburg section of North Philadelphia. I had 2 sections of honors world history and 1 section of US, which was at a college prep level.
Allison Miskowitz. Nice to meet everybody. I'm a math teacher, secondary ed. I've been teaching for about 15 years, currently at a middle school teaching 8th grade math and academic intervention services, AIS.
Bell Hooks is an American author, educator, and social critic. She became popular for her work, Teaching to Transgress, where she explored her journey becoming an educator and her critique of the modern education system. One of Bell Hooks' biggest critiques was the banking system. The banking system is a form of educating in which teachers throw out a bunch of information to their students, and they're expected to store and regurgitate the information back to their teachers. However, this lacks critical thinking when education should be used to spark curiosity in students, not limit them.
Banking is definitely a way I learned a lot of history in school. It was very list the presidents in order. What day was this battle? So I think there could be benefits to the banking method. Students can retain some information by memorization, but that doesn't allow for further analysis, further understanding of the content in a more historical approach. I think in my classroom, I would value discussion more in terms of content understanding. I feel like in history you can have really good discussions that the students can kind of perform their knowledge and be able to, you can assess that a little better than a multiple choice or what years was George Washington president.
When Bell Hooks got to college, she noted that the professors were not excited to be there. They were simply just there to do their job instead of really educating their students. Students lacked that excitement and were really just there to perform the functions that they would do in a normal job rather than truly learning the material.
You can create joy and excitement in a classroom if you involve every student, whether or not they're good at math or if they struggle. I had students that were so excited to come to class because it was a very friendly environment, and who struggled tremendously in math. They told me straight up that they hated math, but they still loved coming to class because if they know that they're going to just be accepted as they are, let's work on this, let's work on, let's just try to learn today. And, they end up really putting in their effort.
Students were taught to be obedient, not true learners. And this only leads to better workers. However, this leads to a lack of critical thinking in society where we need it. When Bell Hooks got to prestigious white universities, she noticed that marginalized students had a much harder time fitting in. They found that they were not there simply just to learn, but rather to prove themselves to those white students, which shows that education goes beyond just academic pressures in the classroom, but social pressures as well.
I think especially at the secondary level, it's hard to connect with every single student. We only see them, but I was lucky we got a block schedule. I got to see them for 75 minutes every day, but you don't get to connect with every student in the same way.
So just recognizing that, again, I just really feel like one of the most important things for teachers to do is create an atmosphere of, complete friendliness, understanding, acceptance, and just so that they can let their walls down. And I've had students come in crying to me, and they just really just need to be seen a little bit. Give them a hug, whatever. In middle school, there's a lot of drama between girls and things like that, and they come to class upset, because their whole school day is stressful. So just recognizing, and that if they feel understood by their teacher, they really come in ready to learn. I really never felt that kids were checked out in terms of, even when they came in clearly dealing with other things. Again, it's just the atmosphere. I mean, if a teacher doesn't recognize this, kids keep those walls up, and they're just not relaxed and in a place where they can learn.
Bell Hooks noted that one of the main classes that really sparked a curiosity for the action of critical thinking in the classroom was our feminist classrooms. In these classrooms, students had the opportunity to express their mind and show what they're really passionate about. This allowed for that first step of critical thinking. She noted that while all opinions weren't always, accepted or really understood, they had the opportunity to share what they really thought, which really helped them understand what it means to critically think. Bell Hooks noted that classrooms should be exciting and never boring. Students should want to be there. If they don't want to be there, they're simply not going to learn. So in this increasingly digital world, teachers need to integrate technology effectively to make students actively involved and want to be there every single day.
One day I brought excitement into the class. I made a game for the students. We were learning about the Chinese dynasties, and for ancient history, it's kind of hard to visualize and kind of put yourself in the shoes of not having access to technology and stuff like that. So I made this game or simulation for the students, and there was this gameplay log where each group of students, they kind of would have scenarios happen to their dynasty, and sometimes oh no, famine happens, and so it's they would lose points and stuff like that. And at the end of my student teaching experience, they all told me that was their favorite activity that they had done, just because it made the content more relevant to them.
Bell Hooks painted the picture of our current education system as flawed. First, with the idea of the banking system, where students are simply asked to memorize information and regurgitate it, is simply inefficient and lacks the individualistic aspect of our education that the students really need. In a perfect education system, students would be able to engage with one another in constructive dialogue, proactively pitching what they believe to really educate each other.
Curriculum battles, and so that's something that's been on my mind in terms of the content I will be teaching. I want to make sure that I'm teaching my students, but also staying within those guidelines, because it is my certification. But I want to be able to discuss politics, inequities, because I don't think you can not have history class without those ideas.
Really, it's you're only covering the surface, and you're not really getting that depth. That's the way it goes. I mean, when you look at the curriculum from grades 6 through 12, the amount of things that need to be covered is incredible.
I kind of did a little environmental unit during our 1970s unit, and that really wasn't involved in the curriculum, but that was very helpful in like for the students to kind of understand like modern day climate change event to them. And so I think like having a little bit of freedom in the content, like to make it something that's kind of a global like current issue too, to bring history to the present.
John Dewey was one of the most influential educational philosophers of the 20th century. He believed that learning wasn't just memorizing facts. It was doing, growing, and questioning experience. For Dewey, the classroom wasn't a place to just passively receive information. It was a mini democracy of its own. A space where students practiced thinking critically, working together, and talking through real-world problems. Instead of training students to follow directions, Dewey wanted to nurture curiosity and create powerful members in a democratic society that could positively contribute and benefit to said society.
One of the schools that I had the chance to observe over the last 4 years is called Esperanza Academy Charter School. It's in Hunting Park, section of Philly. And one of the things that the school did to like promote curiosity, they would do a question of the day for every class every day. And so this was great because especially for history, it was always awesome to start with a question, get the students thinking, and yeah, just hear their thoughts and perspective.
Dewey believed that the purpose of education was not simply an accumulation of knowledge, but it was to create the ability to discriminate. He wanted people to be able to critically evaluate a situation, especially in a political and social context. He strongly believed that schooling often avoided the critical approach towards history and politics, idealizing industries while not acknowledging social problems and issues. Dewey finally concludes this essay titled Education as Politics, making a bold claim that education and politics are inherently linked. They're linked because an education shapes how people engage politically with social affairs.
Yeah, it comes up almost daily. And it is difficult to like assess what kind of freedom I have as a teacher. Obviously, like all of us are entitled to our First Amendment right, the freedom of speech. But it is difficult because of what constitutes freedom of speech and how everybody might understand that differently. But I have had my students point blank say, like, Miss Fragana, what do you think about the Second Amendment? Whoa. And it's stuff like that where it's like, that's a great question, but like that's something we can't really talk about. And I would probably like hope in the future that like we could have a discussion about why these amendments are around. But to that question, all I had to say was, I cannot speak on this right now.
A truly educated person will be able to handle managing social affairs while engaging with a democratic society. So the next piece of literature from John Dewey we'll be examining is Liberalism and Social Action, published in the year 1935. So bouncing off his last piece of literature, Education as Politics, Dewey goes on to claim that education should be used as a means. It shouldn't just merely be a transmission of one topic to another person. It needs to be used as a means to critically think, a means of social action and civil engagement.
Do you find it effective to have your students speak on it and discuss respectfully between themselves as you kind of just step back and let them take the reins? Maybe you could facilitate it a little bit, but just mainly let them have a respectful conversation about these issues?
Definitely. I think as I gain more experience and more comfortability to be able to manage classroom behavior, I will 100% engage in that kind of discussion.
It is a form of social action that equips individuals with the skills and dispositions that they need for a democratic life. So in this literature, Dewey explains the utter importance of education, claiming that it is the foundation to which a society can properly function. Only through education can people break free of class, economic disadvantages, and inequality. He heavily advocated for an education system that provides an equal opportunity for all. It shouldn't just be a mastery of one or several topics, but it should be a way to engage and interact with the world around them. Throughout his literature, Dewey doesn't elaborate on the word education in itself, but he does use intelligence. Intelligence must be developed, and this occurs primarily through the education system, which is why we are in dire need of reform for this education system, as it is clearly failing the students and citizens of our democracy. Which is why, in part, Dewey heavily critiques this education system in America, as it fails to provide intellectual and cultural resources and make them broadly accessible to the citizens. Which is why, as of right now, we just have an education system that simply exists. It doesn't empower people to think critically, and this is the main point that Dewey has been advocating for across his literature. It shouldn't be an elitist or narrowly distributed system, but should be widely available and accessible for all, and it should allow every citizen and person in a nation or society to benefit from its shared knowledge. So to wrap this reading up, John Dewey has elaborated on why humans need to develop their intelligence for two reasons: to benefit their democratic society around them and to benefit themselves. And the only way to do this is educational reform, because this system is not working right now.
And then there's the whole testing situation, right? And I know that we're from various states here. New York State regions programs are, some of them are being phased out, but the standardized testing and the New York State regions testing, and I know we're in Pennsylvania and New Jersey as well. It's just very, very rigorous, and it's focused on so much. And I feel that we've gotten to a point where students base their worth on it, and it's just so, it's really a shame. I believe that we need some sort of national measure, but it's gotten a little bit out of hand.
So the final text from John Dewey that we'll be analyzing is Democracy is Radical, published in 1937. Dewey ultimately published this piece of text to propose and express this contrasting perspective that he had towards the rising fascist tensions in Europe. These rising authoritarian presences in Europe aim to suppress inquiry-based educational systems. So as previously stated, Dewey's been advocating for this inquiry-based educational system. He strongly expresses that we need voluntary participation and critical thinking rather than these coercive methods that these authoritarian presences were trying to use in Europe at the time. So in conclusion for Democracy is Radical, as Dewey analyzed these other political systems over in Europe, he expressed how they failed to uphold and develop growth in an individualistic manner for their citizens. They failed to create critical thinking that allowed their citizens to engage beneficially in this world, which is why Dewey advocates this inquiry-based education system for a proper democratic society. P4C is an educational movement which stands for Philosophy for Children. It was sparked by many different educational philosophers such as John Dewey. It is meant to create a sense of critical thinking, problem solving, and overall just a better creative aspect within children.
Some of the positive advantages of P4C include that it allows students to engage in open dialogue and build off each other. In activities such as the agree or disagree statement, where students come up with a statement and either agree or disagree and have to explain their stance, students are reflecting with real-world problems and developing solutions in which is perfectly applicable to their life and into the future. In a P4C setting, students learn to engage with one another in a respectful and freely manner. They learn active listening skills and apply what their classmates are saying to their everyday life. In this increasingly polarized world, it's important that people are actively listening to one another and really understanding what they're trying to get at to be able to formulate their own views and portray what they believe is true.
Recently, at the end of student teaching, I did a Athens versus Sparta debate, and the students did amazing with it. They really engaged with it with very great arguments, and they were very respectful of each other. I presented very clear expectations to them before, but training would be great, especially like in order to make my students be sensitive toward their fellow students and other perspectives that may be out there.
I do think that while it's definitely not as relevant to mathematics. I just feel like even real life situations pop up all the time in the classroom that you're talking to students about. So I do think that, I agree, the training would be great.
So with P4C comes many disadvantages. Starting off on a broader scale nationally, it is extremely hard to implement this on a federal scale. Since the Department of Education was just recently dissolved, it is nearly impossible to have a nationwide philosophy for children movement that is similar within each state. And then honing in on the school, in the classroom, there comes many problems as well. Teachers may lack the training or abilities to facilitate a class and provide a proper discussion within, as well as students may lack the social capabilities to talk and critically think and verbalize what they are trying to say about certain topics. These disadvantages, while they do not outweigh the advantages, may be a crucial problem with P4C. Another major disadvantage is the massive polarization within our country right now. The hostile political climate has caused many students to fear expressing their own and true opinions within a classroom. This is crucial why teachers must create a safe environment when implementing a P4C climate within the classroom.
From these disadvantages, we came up with a few recommendations. First, we just need to dedicate more time to P4C in our classrooms. Students want to engage in this style of learning. They don't want to just be lectured to. So by engaging in constructive dialogue, they're more interested in what they're learning about, no matter the subject. Next, it is important that teachers are fully equipped with the appropriate skills to effectively facilitate these conversations. This does not just involve online seminars, but rather in-person experiences where they get to experience this firsthand. By doing this, teachers fully understand the benefits and can apply this to their full classroom experience.
Our final text we'll be analyzing is Dopamine, Digital Devices, and Democracy, published by Tibor Salamusi in 2017. So in this text, Salamusi expresses John Dewey's ideas of promoting thinking and deliberate reflection rather than a memorization of facts through lectures. But he also adds in that twist of digital devices in the modern world that promote instant gratification rather than this sense of critical thinking, and they hit your dopamine receptor. In a seminar-based classroom, when we implement methods such as P4C, we want to transfer students from a technological, robotic-driven environment to a more discussion-based climate. As Dewey implores, we must stop and think despite our gadgets. These dopamine-driven distractions are disrupting students' reflective thinking and overall, their ability to engage with material.
We want students to be able to engage with one another and engage accurately with the content so they can really emphasize their learning. By simply seeking out dopamine, they're limiting their capabilities of being able to effectively learn the material and simply just memorizing it.
Dewey and other classical pragmatists push for an interaction between science, technology, and human experience. That's why Salamusi advocates for Dewey's ideas of integrating naturalism in education.
This is why students need to engage with real-world problems so they can effectively learn to engage with the world around them. They need to understand what is going on and what role they play in our society today.
So Salamusi continues to emphasize throughout the text that the use of technology within education should promote thoughtful and intentional engagement rather than passive consumption. So this is why the education system should not utilize technology as a means of just simply delivering content, but as a way for students to reflect on their digital lives, which is the main reason why Bell Hooks critiques this banking system of just digesting content passively.
As a student that grew up in this digital age, I learned to just take in information passively, especially with all these technological tools at my fingertips. I was simply just absorbing information without truly reflecting on the material. Moving forward, students need to learn to reflect on what they're learning and simply not just memorize information for a test. They need to be able to apply this to their future lives and not just for the moment.
So this is why we must reshape our education system to one that is conscious of cultural and societal forces at play. Salamusi heavily critiques neoliberal values and market-driven approaches that are heavily affecting our education system negatively.
One example of this market-driven approach is with a company such as Apple or Dell. They produce laptops and iPads, which, while in some cases this can be beneficial to students since it allows them to more easily take notes and take them home and engage with school softwares, in other cases it provides a distraction for students during class time. They can quickly become distracted by something on their laptop and lose focus on what's going on in front of them in the classroom.
So in conclusion to Solomosi's dopamine democracy, technology is a major distraction in the classroom today, as it is not allowing students to engage and reflect critically in their work. Technology such as iPads and laptops are not proving beneficial. Although they are efficient, this is not working in the classroom, and we must create some limitations to these technological devices. So the next piece we'll be moving into is AI as Normal Technology, published by Reimagining and Kapoor in 2025. They're both from Princeton and have studied the societal impact of technology such as AI.
In the lectures and articles posted by Narayanan and Kapoor, they critique AI and this fears that AI is this super technology capable of expanding past human capabilities. However, they paint a more realistic picture of what AI really is. This normal technology in which humans are in full control of and using as a tool rather than a replacement for human worth.
I think students will always try to cut corners, but I think there could be benefits. I think they could use it as like a research tool, but I think it's just being misused because they think they can get away with it.
Breaking into some of the advantages of AI, it can be used as a tool in the classroom. In some instances where there's a lot of material to get through, you can import it into an AI technology that can quickly summarize and help you organize the material. However, there is disadvantages that come with this since students are abusing these technologies. They're having to complete all their assignments, which really lacks that critical thinking and reflection that they should be getting out of their assignments. Students need to be able to accurately engage with their work, their classwork, and not simply use these AI technologies to do it for them.
On the student side, they are using AI. They are using it at the high school level, freshmen in high school. They know how to use it, but the teachers, we know how to spot it. And so there is software that the districts do pay for that flags AI.
So I had an 8th grader who completely learned how to do fractions that way. I mean, he should have learned that in elementary school, but he didn't. And it really changed his life and his test scores. I think that's a last minute addendum, but it's those things. If kids could be given the chance to use it right, maybe a few would.
So today, a lot of students don't use AI effectively. You can use it to learn new traits, skills, and even new material. However, students just abuse this power by pumping and dumping work instead of critically reflecting and thinking on it, which is why we think that classrooms and schools as a whole should implement training and teach students how to effectively and efficiently use these artificial intelligence tools.
I think students will always try to cut corners, but I think there could be benefits. I think they could use it as like a research tool, but I think it's just being misused because they think they can get away with it.
However, despite all of this, the integration of AI is going a lot slower than people think. Generative AI is only the start, and while there's a lot of buzz around the word, completely integrating it into a work and school life is going to take years, maybe even decades.
Once we begin to understand that these AI technologies are going to take a significantly longer time to integrate, we must learn to use these tools effectively now. Students need to learn to engage with them accurately and effectively to make sure they're using it for a productive use rather than a tool that's used to complete their work for them. By doing this, we encourage critical thinking and reflection on their work rather than merely abusing these technologies.
Not a lot of homework is being sent home anymore. So that's kind of the downside. No more homework because we know that they're not going to do it because AI is doing it. So we do the work in school. That's about it.
In summary, Narayanan and Kapoor flipped the script on what it means to talk about AI. AI is not this super intelligent technology that's going to take over the world, but rather this normal technology that we need to learn to integrate into our education system to better the education of our children today. If we don't do this, we have a potential threat of abusing AI and really lacking the future generation's ability to reflect and engage with the content material in their classrooms.
So how can we make this an actual reality? There's numerous subjects that every kid must learn. We have mathematics, history, science, philosophical classes, psychological classes, but obviously there are some classes where a teacher or an expert must actually teach the students. So for these types of classes, we only want to implement a small portion of the time to an inquiry-based discussion. But other classes where this is the foundation and the building blocks of what goes on, such as a history class, as students want to talk about what has happened and what is going to happen as they analyze the past, present, and hopefully the future.
This forces us to challenge our current education system, in which banking methods take over. Teachers are pushing information on their students and not allowing for the freedom of expression. By doing this, they're limiting their students' capabilities and not allowing them to truly flourish. Education needs to be about pursuing what we are passionate about and what's going to make change in the world, not simply pushing agendas. So moving forward, we must come up with positive solutions and ways to address these problems and come up with real conversations.
So as Dewey has previously stated, one of the most foundational pieces to this entire idea and project is simply teaching students how to engage with the world. We look at universities like this very own, where students pick a career path at an average age of 18 years old, and they follow that for the rest of their lives without truly broadening their lenses and exploring life. In order to actually implement this into a university, along with not forcing students to just choose a career path at an age of 18 years old and stick with it, we need to allow them to have more freedom and take classes that actually stimulate their mind, similar to a seminar-type inquiry-based discussion, which is what Dewey and me and Ryan have been advocating this entire documentary.
The final leg of reforming the education system as proposed by us, as well as these philosophers that we've seen, is understanding the future impacts and implications. We need to first understand AI technology and how it's going to be integrated into our society. As we've seen with Narayanan, as well as Kapoor, we need to learn to integrate these technologies as a tool, not a replacement. These technologies are not a super intelligent being that's going to replace all human capabilities, but rather a very normal technology. These can be integrated into a classroom experience as a tool to help students, such as studying for an exam or reinforcing practice problems, rather than just giving them solutions or writing essays for them. So moving forward, we need to understand these technologies and learn to work with them, not for them. But the movement doesn't stop here. We need to make rapid educational reform to make this possible. Teachers need to implement seminar-style learning to their curriculum to encourage critical thinking and deepen the reflection that students have with their material. Students need to want to be excited about coming to class, not dread it. So let's start now.